Welcome back to the Meme Team podcast, where we discuss viral pop culture moments in movies, TV, music, and politics. I'm your host, Sonia, and this week we're talking about partnerships, who you choose, and what it costs. This week, Meta launched their own glasses brand with Kylie Jenner. Google Deepmind put $75 million into A24. Universal decided that Nolan's The Odyssey doesn't need influencer screenings, and a former Apple and Audi designer partnered to design a new golf cart. And so my guest this week is Lia Napolitano, founder of Our Mutual Friend, a design studio for founders. Before that, she works at Apple and Oculus. Lia, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here.
Awesome. So let's just dive right in. So on June 23rd, Meta announced they were ending their Ray-Ban co-brand and launching Meta Glasses by Kylie. It was actually funny because it was like they launched it on the same day that Snapchat was kind of announcing that they might be getting Robert Downey Jr. to be like an ambassador. So it was kind of like taking the thunder away from Snapchat by saying like, look, we got Kylie. Here's, her branded glasses. And then they launched a commercial yesterday, which kind of shows, Kylie going through her house and doing normal things, right? And so it again has brought up a bunch of questions about like, who is this product for? Like, who's going to be buying Meta glasses? And then, of course, all the privacy and security concerns from people that are like, I don't want to hang out with anybody that's wearing glasses because I don't want it to infringe on my privacy. And so part of the controversy that's going on here is by removing their partnership with Ray-Ban and just working with Kylie Jenner, they're kind of just like soft scrubbing the problem that everybody was complaining about. At the same time, there was an artist and creative director called Layla Gohar, who is known for her whimsical food environments, and she collaborated with Meta on this launch event. And all her fans were pretty disappointed in her and said, your work is beautiful, but your work is being used in service of something deeply troubling. Or I've admired you for a few years, and this is so disappointing. So it was kind of bringing up this whole idea of what it means to partner with brands that are using you to kind of improve their image, but then also this whole concept of selling out, right? It seems like we've kind of moved beyond the 90s discussion of like what it means to sell out and replaced it now with you can, go corporate, but you can't go to like brands that, potentially have bad images like Meta does or Palantir. What does it mean to partner with a brand as like a celebrity, tying your brands together? Is it beneficial or not? So Leah, would love to know any thoughts that you have.
When I saw the announcement of the collab, I had this moment that I think a lot of consumers are having where personally, I know a ton of people who work at Meta on
Hmm.
the Glasses project and who are like so smart and talented and well-intentioned and like really interested in building technology and products that last. And I also see in headlines news like, I don't know if this is something you had the chance to cover, but I think it was in the spring, a coverage of people in Kenya having to review the footage because they had a contract with Meta
Mm-hmm.
glasses and
Yeah.
seeing things that were causing extreme trauma, and then Meta severing that contract and 1,000
Hmm.
people being laid off. Like we just see in the headlines some pretty intense
Hmm.
stories around this type of technology, and then also, the backlash for Ring with surveillance
Right.
technology, but also showing up at the Super Bowl and kind of being surprised that people didn't like that they could
Yeah.
help them find dogs. Like we really keep getting pulled in the purchasing decisions that we're asked to make and the way that technology is moving into these conversations about the like ethics and morals of using certain products,
Hmm.
of shaping certain products. And I think bringing in a celebrity spokesperson can do a couple of things. One
Yeah.
of those things is sort of create a different distracting conversation that removes scrutiny from some of those topics. And
Hmm.
then I think also can just increase the sense of inevitability of, oh, well, like, okay, honestly, the Kylie collab seems cute. Like suddenly people are shifting to some of the more superficial aspects of the product,
Yeah.
even before thinking about, is this a useful object for my life? And do I really understand the impact of different purchasing or usage decisions I might make here in terms of where technology is moving, in terms of like what I'm just comfortable with and what I expect from the companies building things. So it was an interesting moment for me to look at it and say, honestly, like like, I feel shame saying it. I'm like, "Oh, I thought it looked kinda cute." And then, you go online and people are like, "They're like
Yeah.
cyber trucks for your face." And I'm like, that also seems
Yeah.
true. And so
Yeah.
it's a tough challenge that consumers have. And I think that, from a pure brand standpoint, it's a really, I think, an effective move by Meta to shift the
Mhm.
conversation to are these cute or not, rather
Yeah.
than even is this a useful thing for me? And am I comfortable with some of the other ethical impacts of using a product like this?
Yes. So last week when the collaboration first came out, I was like, this is actually very smart of Meta because in comparison to Snapchat, which is trying to get, Robert Downey Jr., who like, fine, I guess he's going to be in Marvel again. Obviously, the Kylie Jenner collaboration made more sense, especially because if Meta is trying to become more fashionable, right? Let's, make them attractive, make them more appealing to younger consumers. Kylie fits all those like, buckets, right? Um, and like one of the quotes that I wanted to mention here is that there was a Substack from Lily Turner that said that Meta's response to mounting scrutiny over how the glasses are being used has not been to limit the recording capabilities; it has been to hire Kylie Jenner. That became more obvious with this commercial, right? So the commercial made clear to me two things. One, it's a pretty boring product to use on a day-to-day basis, right? Because what are you really doing, right? You see her, she's painting her nails, she's walking around her house, she's seeing like workers come in and I guess deliver a statue. But the second thing was what it wasn't showing, which is any aspect of her life that is interesting, right? Her relationship with Timothy Chalamet, her beauty business and like how she became a billionaire, her children, her family, like none of that is in there because of the privacy concerns, right? When they did just the photo campaigns, then your imagination takes you like, where would you use these, right? Um, and so by actually showing what you use them for, it shows the flaw in the product, right? And it also brings up the privacy concerns again because she's very clearly, concerned about her privacy because she's not showing anything that's private, Um, and so that was like one of those things where, you mentioned the Kenya story. And now that I'm like thinking, it's like the big thing that came out from that is how much men were filming women in, inappropriate places, in inappropriate situations. And that was what, the Kenyan, whistleblowers were saying. When that came out, it's like, well, yeah, that's exactly what people are going to be using these glasses for, right? And so they've been trying to kind of, wash that away because that's the biggest concern that people have. And it was like funny because it's like, oh, I guess you didn't actually have to do the commercial. You could have just left it at the photo ad and seen what came from it. But you wanted to push more about like we have Kylie, we should get her to like sell the glasses more, So it's really funny because it's like, you know, there are marketing things that you can be doing that will
Yeah,
obscure
obfuscate. Yeah.
um
Yeah.
the concerns that people have. These are the conversations that people should be having before we even get to yes, we should just, give away our privacy to do these things.
Totally. And yeah, I mean, like, what are the use cases for these products right now? So for me, when I worked at Oculus, a big part of my choice to go there was, I mean, one, I knew some folks who were working in design there who were really brilliant, I had a lot of respect for. But two, I kind of felt self-conscious about being a skeptic about
Mhm.
VR, about like the like magical headset world use case,
Mhm.
the metaverse. I don't want to like naively think that the use cases aren't there. Let me go and work on it and find out if the use cases are there and if the technology's there and if this really feels like a tool for connection. And
Mhm.
for me personally, in a year working there, really interesting product to work on. I did not become a convert to, oh yeah, a really cool, awesome future is one where we all like go into our headsets
Mhm.
and have this rich experience alone with our thoughts. And also I think
Yeah.
the AR use cases were the most fun to design for. Like thinking about like that was the first device where you weren't tethered to a computer, you had like
Mhm.
full pass through. And so it was really fun to design experiences like, okay, great. And then you leave your boundary for your game. You can see your world. You walk to your kitchen to get a drink. You
Mhm.
see your other play space and you're like in this modified reality. It felt really exciting and interesting.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, this version of the world that you're in and no one else is in just doesn't feel great. And I don't think the killer app is there even now when we have
Mhm.
this much more sleek from a human factor standpoint
Yeah.
set of devices, which are more focused on augmented reality. This weekend, I was in Vegas and I went to Omega Mart. I don't know if you've been, but like
Mm-mm.
it's one of so there's this art collective Meow Wolf, and it's one of their big projects, this site specific immersive experience. And their whole like social media virality aspect is you go into what looks like a regular convenience store, but it's weird and they have weird products like tattooed chicken. And then you walk through the cooler and then you're in a different world. It's a very like it's
Mm.
very it's fun. Teenage boys really like it, it turns out. And so I was standing there like looking around, doing what everyone else is doing, which is like
Mhm.
taking photos and being like, oh, I want my friends to see this back home. And I found myself standing next to someone looking at the cooler, and there was a tattooed chicken. And I heard them say, like, Meta, take a picture. And I was like, oh, weird. Like, and
Oh,
what a weird thing for me to observe you doing this. You
sure.
also, I'm alone, you're alone. We're not even having this experience together. You want to share this thing with someone who isn't having this experience with you. Like,
Yeah.
what a sad, strange world we're in where the main use case is taking a picture to show friends who aren't with you a thing that they
Yeah.
wouldn't enjoy as much if they were with you. So
Yeah.
I just, all this to say, like, the the use cases I still don't think are really there. And
Yeah.
so we're just focusing on like, doesn't this look cool though? And we're also distracting from all of these other issues of like, should we be using this right now? Is this
Yeah.
safe? Is this considerate? Like there were so many things that were kind of they're trying to distract from. And I agree with you. I think an ad like that sort of points out, like, wait, is this a distraction? Like, is
Yeah.
this not it? So anyway, I just, yeah, lots of thoughts. And it was weird to see it in the wild.
Yeah, I think that's one of the conversations here I'd love to have with you. Like from a design perspective, if Meta is trying to sell glasses and, move us in that direction, what is the actual problem that Meta has to solve? Is it aesthetic, which is what Kylie Jenner is here to do, to make it look more fashionable and less like the Snapchat, spectacles? Is it social, the fact that people feel as if they're being surveilled, that they're going to lose their privacy? Or is it something else? Is it like marketing where it's like you have to lead the horse to water, right? Like you have to teach people and educate them on what they can actually use the meta glasses for. Um, and like, is it just that they haven't found that thing yet? And then as soon as they do, people will be like, okay, I get it. Now I need to get like meta glasses.
Yeah, one of the big macro problems I would love to see Meta solve is engaging with the problems that are arising from their technology and how they're building it. And I do think consumers feel it. If you're using, as you
Yeah.
said, Kylie Jenner as a spokesperson, that's making a decision to reach out to women, young women who
Hmm.
identify as like again, fashionable, existing in the world. They have a lot of purchasing power. If you want to relate to them and actually have respect for them, you would conduct yourself differently as a business, I think. So that's like one thing. But I
Yeah.
think in terms of like aesthetic, social, something else, yeah, I do think I like teams working on the with real use cases from here. I think that aesthetic, I think it was a good move. I think that I think Ray-Ban has not come across as like a really fashionable brand in a long
Yeah.
time. Definitely less so for women than for men. And so I think if you're trying to have more of a shift again on the demographic side and in terms of who, buys your product, that's really smart. And I also think that like Meta's really been putting the work in on
Hmm.
obtaining design credibility, and so
Yeah.
like I think it's exciting and interesting to see them owning that and considering that a differentiator. I'm curious to see where they take that. There is a lot of opportunity on the design side as well, which is like how do you make it so that one this object being in these spaces there is any amount of communicated intention around more privacy awareness, like more sensitivity to the people who are doing, any kind of review of footage on these devices, like take more ownership, take
Hmm.
responsibility for the privacy aspects, and also like play around with a little bit more how someone who's wearing this device is still existing in community with people around
Hmm.
them. I think that if I'm wearing a device and I'm saying like, Meta take a picture, not only is that like weird for the people around me, but
Yeah.
it's not inviting them in, it's alienating, it's
Yeah.
not making them into a brand spokesperson. And I think that, when I look at successful brands, it's ones where someone sees someone else using a thing and they're like, oh, sick. Like, I want to have the experience of using that thing.
Yeah.
It's not, I want to buy that thing. I want to use it. And I feel motivated and it's already connecting with me even before I have it
Yeah.
in my property. And so I do think there's a really big miss. And I'm curious, from an industrial design standpoint, from user experience standpoint, if there, I remember Google Glass back in the day, like had a light to tell you it was recording, which did not make people feel more connected to it and
Right.
like it more. That, if you recall, was went really badly. So there was
Well, but that's
something
one of
here.
the
There's some
things.
opportunity. Yeah.
Well, that's
Hmm.
one of the things with this new version of the glasses. It got rid of the light. So it does make it more difficult for people to know that there is a device around them that's on, right? And so that's part of also what's leading this conversation around privacy, and especially if they're not being warned that it's happening. Also, the big thing here is like how much of a behavioral change we're expecting of users, right? And
Right.
as we know, those changing of habits is like one of the hardest things to get people to do, especially if there are social knocks against it. So that's
Yeah.
kind of, the uphill battle that, Meta is fighting right now, but using a, influencer, who it's funny. The other thing I was thinking of is like, clearly like, Kylie is used to having her life recorded. That's what made her famous, or part of what made her famous. And then, she went off and did the beauty thing. But it was so glaring, the fact that she wasn't willing to show more of her life, which she clearly has no qualms doing about, for like the Kardashian show. And so that was like another misstep for me, because it was like, oh, you're not even putting it in the real context of what her life really is, which is what you're supposed to be doing for like the Meta glasses. So it just ended up being like an all around fail for me. I haven't really heard any backlash from her fans or like people, which I think is interesting when that artist did, right? And I think there is, just kind of taking it back to the conversation about like what it means to collaborate with a brand, especially a controversial
Mhm.
brand, is what it means for you, depending on like where your character, your integrity, the way that you've been showing that you show up for things, um where if it makes sense, then people have less, ammo, right, for you. Whereas with Layla Gohar, the people were upset and were disappointed that she did partner with them. And I do think that there is going to be some sort of a reckoning that has to happen. Either like one where it's like we stop caring about, influencers at all, which is what we'll talk about later. And, when I'm talking about, the Odyssey and the influencers, and kind of, how they're not being welcomed in that, and whether that's a new
Mhm.
future that we have to look forward to, or if it's going to go more in where we trust creators, we trust, celebrities, we trust politicians, and the more that we put our trust in them, the more that we trust the products that they're selling, policies that they're selling, their ideals, their values, and all that, and how much we're giving up of our own making choices in what we buy, in what we, and who we vote for, and everything outside of that. So I'll be curious to see kind of what comes from this, because it does bring up questions beyond that for me, right? Just in terms of both marketing, but like personally. So that's one of the lessons here, is kind of like figure out where your brand stands for creators. If you are going to work with these types of controversial brands, you have to be able to stand up to it and own it, right? If you're not going to do that, then like maybe reconsider that it's not worth taking, I'm sure she got paid, well, it's Meta. They have a lot of, budget. And then as a like brand that's like working with, influencers, like make sure that that overlap is there, so that like you both kind of benefit from the situation. Any lessons
Definitely.
from you?
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, the amount that you're getting paid, do
Yep.
you feel that that's enabling you to do better work on behalf of the communities that you represent? Or are you doing more for the person who's paying you to your own
Hmm.
detriment? And I think, and to your community's potential detriment. And so I think
Right.
it is that like being very thoughtful about potential yeah, ramifications that are financial or just like brand trust greater than what you're getting paid to do something, and then being, as you said, like ready and willing to take responsibility for
Yeah.
what you are doing with your time, and
Right.
like the risks that you are taking, and hopefully, to maintain trust with your community, have a good reason beyond like, well, it's inevitable and a seat at the table, like there's a
Yeah,
little
yeah,
bit
yeah,
more
yeah.
ownership that I think you need to be prepared to take.
I'll throw in one last one because what you just said reminded me of that is, um, there are ways for brands to obscure bad press, and I think this was one of the, big ones of doing that is, like, the celebrity thing. I saw it recently with, Gwyneth Paltrow, partnering
God,
with that,
yeah.
luxury hotel. The conversation just kinda became about that instead of, like, the resort and all that. So, those are questions that you need to be asking yourself of, like, where's this conversation gonna head, and do you actually wanna have those conversations? Because if you don't, then, like, don't do it. But if you are trying to flip the conversation, then getting a celebrity to be a shield, I guess, is a very clever marketing ploy that is effective.
Totally, and something you mentioned is, like, Kylie's fans don't seem too mad. Her brand has never been about some kind of,
Yeah.
like, moral alignment. Like, that's
Right.
just never been the thing, and
Yeah.
so if you're excited for Kylie in general, like, of
Yeah.
course, you're gonna still be excited for Kylie. I think that, other creators who are faced with this opportunity of, "Okay, great, I just have to support this thing, and, like, maybe it's brand aligned for me, and, like,
Hmm.
financially, it's aligned for me." I the thing to check in on is, like, couldn't it be more valuable to you long term to actually take more of a stand in your brand? Like, there are the
Hmm.
Kylies of the world. There are already people who, like, their audience is not contingent on them showing up in a certain way in the world. It can feel really daunting when I think a lot of folks are losing faith in institutions and brands to like
Yeah.
do the right thing. It could feel sort of like, well, I'm going to have to take money from someone compromised anyway.
Yeah.
I think there's a moment here for creators to really look at like what they stand for, and is there an opportunity to go deeper in that? It may take more work, but it also would be something that you own that is hopefully, much more high integrity and serves your audience and your community better than, just going with something Kylie's already doing it.
Yeah, agree. I think that's the perfect segue into A24 and Google.
So let's talk about A24 and Google. June 22nd, Google DeepMind announced this $75 million investment in A24 alongside this multi-year research and development partnership. And so the goal as put out there is we want to, build AI filmmaking tools that are shaped by like the best. And so DeepMind was already working with individual filmmakers, Darren Aronofsky being an example, but this was the first time they were partnering with the studio. And I think for audiences who are fans of A24 films and really see them as representing, again, this like artist focused, more daring brand, this was a really challenging thing for folks to swallow. And so A24, like what you'll notice is it was like Google DeepMind's publicity, like, they were really proud to show off this
Yeah.
deal, whereas A24 in coverage has seemed much more defensive and much more focused on, well, like, we're not letting Google train on our content library or data, like, we're kinda just gonna let them hang out in the room with us and learn about how we work, like, really focusing on process. So filmmaking, process, workflow, decision making, that's the territory that they're actually getting to do research on. And
Hmm.
A24 also has like their own in-house labs team that has been working on tools already. But I
Hmm.
think when you look at the headlines, there's a real sense of betrayal in
Hmm.
industry and then also by audiences where,
Hmm.
A24 has seemed really prestige and secretive and really intentional. And then to, move forward on a deal that feels like AI is getting more keys to the castle for generative work that's going to displace workers and really shift
Hmm.
the quality and daringness of art. Like this was a really big deal for people. A point that I know you made is really great. Like there's this thought of seat at the table, but
Yeah.
is it possible that pulling up a chair is what's making it real? Like that it's not inevitable. You doing these deals is what makes things inevitable
Yeah.
that are not to the benefit of the community. And so, to share a quote, the team says, we believe the best way to develop tools that empower artists is to work directly with them, and collaborating with filmmakers and industry leaders like A24 from the beginning allows building new AI features to support artists and authentic, meaningful storytelling. Uh, but that's always been A24's thing, and now Google DeepMind is claiming it as their own
Mhm,
when the
mhm.
rest of DeepMind's brand is certainly not that to audiences and in the film community.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We talked a similar situation recently about an artist that is an animator who won like some prize to work with Amazon, and he got pilloried by his like fans were like, what are you doing? You're selling out. How dare you? And at the time, and much like this, my problem with it, or like what I thought would have been a better way to announce it, is to really break down, here is what we're going to use AI for. Um, and here's what we're not going to use AI for, right? Because it looked bad that it was Google announcing it, not A24, because then it was like setting them up to have to defend themselves as opposed to like announcing it. Also, people already have the things that they think that AI is going to do, which is replace artists, actors, animators, and like, the people that actually work in the industry. So I really think that what A24 should have done here is really specify, like, they're going to come in and help us, cut down how long it takes us, to do these processes, because it's very inefficient right now, and we see room for improvement. We've already seen improvement from these things, right? So you're giving people like exact situations of like what you're doing, and then you can also say, but we're not going to use it for these, to kind of assuage people and like the harms that they think might come to the industry. um Right now, particularly in Hollywood, and also tech, I'd say, right? Probably anywhere, right? The whole idea of like AI coming to like replace, humans, replace jobs, is rampant, right? So how can you like create an idea or give them a story that, and it's funny because like A24 is known for being, good storytellers. So why couldn't you give a better story about like what you're going to be doing, with this? And I'll bring it up because yesterday, or maybe it was today, I think it was Ford that said that they're rehiring back 300 engineers because the AI that they thought was going to replace these people is insufficient, right? And so like this is like the perfect way to be like, see, we cannot replace humans. We need them to be doing these things, and this is what we're still going to be hiring out for. Um so I think it just like chips away at their integrity when they're trying to like, hide what they're doing, or they're not explaining. I think that's another thing. I think they just assume, oh, people don't understand, people don't know. But assuming that they're, dumb or like they don't care, makes you look even worse, because it shows that like you're not treating your audience with respect, when they do want to trust you, right? Like A24 is I would have said before this actually, is one of the top brands out there. People, love it. They have, positive feelings for it. And this, I'm sure, like, took them down quite a few notches.
What I noticed too with this coverage, and as you said, like the amount that A24 didn't really control the narrative here or seem to have a good handle on the fact that like artists and audiences would be looking to them to have a lot of
Mhm,
integrity in this situation. Instead, the coverage that really stood out to me talked about how that in in lieu of any good examples of what they were going to work on with Google DeepMind, people are finding that A24 Labs has already been working on storyboarding with AI. And
mhm,
so that's an in-house thing. And
mhm.
then people started looking at, oh my gosh, wait a second. A24 took money from Thrive Capital, which is Jared Kushner's. And wait, is Jared Kushner on the board? Like, suddenly
Mhm.
people started to look deeper at again, overall, the brand and really shift their
Right.
understanding of who A24 is for and who it works on behalf of, and like who A24 respects. And I think that is a really hard thing to come back from. I actually am someone who believes there could be a way of doing that very
Mhm.
much on behalf of artists and on behalf of audiences and really shaping the terms. But instead, the coverage really suggested that A24 is not in the position of shaping those terms, does not understand what those terms would look like, and therefore people can't rest that like put that faith in them anymore. And that's going to change the kinds of artists that would work with them and have
Yeah.
trust and faith and the types of audiences that will or won't support those films that they're making. So I think that's where again, who wins in that partnership?
Mhm.
I think in
Yeah.
a lasting way, it's not A24. That's a lot to come back from.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Something you just said, just had my wheel spinning, which is the fact that A24 wasn't able to explain how Google DeepMind would fit into their process shows that A24 is it either naive in how much Google is going to benefit from this, but then also that they don't have someone that understands how AI or technology works, right? And this is a constant refrain. We see senators trying to talk to, Mark Zuckerberg about what social media does, right? And then they're like, "Oh, but can I delete, emails?" And it's like, that's a completely different thing, you know? So
Yes.
I think it would behoove these types of companies like A24 to find somebody like that's like in-house that like will speak to you and can like educate you on like what the different processes are that AI is useful for, right? Because one of the things here is like A24 says that Google won't train on their films. Okay, fine. But the access to the filmmaking workflow, how shots are developed, how stories get greenlit, how editors work, might actually be worth a lot more to AI than like the final like work product, right? Because that's where AI can actually do a lot more to help. But how much is that going to remove the humans from the loop, right? So that's, something that kind of became clear as like the conversation continued.
Very well put. And yeah, just a real, really huge failure on their part to come into this communicating the intention. Like, I think,
Yeah.
my takeaway is someone who read plenty of articles and understands
Mhm.
AI and, likes A24 films. My takeaway is they're taking a whole bunch of money and I don't think that the things I like about what A24 does and who it gives money to are going to benefit. Like, I think
Yeah.
like my impression is it will be to the detriment of the work that company is able to do anymore. There's kind of this third possibility. So there's one possibility, which is they're naive. There's another possibility, which is they're totally complicit. There is another possibility, but it's one that again, like they have to do this to be proven not just naive and complicit, which is
Mhm.
they are very intentionally doing this on behalf
Mhm.
of artists, industry. They are going to like they're making commitments to employ more storyboard artists. They are making
Right.
commitments to like take any efficiency gains that they get from something
Right.
and put that into creating much more innovative, like
Right.
human created work. And we're not hearing that that's the upshot. And if
Yeah.
you're not declaring that proudly, then you're not thinking of it. You are not holding yourself accountable to it.
Mhm.
And like, it's just like until proven otherwise, yeah, it's naive or complicit or both.
Yeah, yeah. I think that you said it much better than I did, but that was basically how I had been thinking about it. And I think when these partnerships are coming out, much like earlier when we were talking about, being able to detail out the things you are trying to get from it, and how you're going to give back to the industry. They could have said we are going to give all these efficiency gains in order to create more stories, right? Like in order to reinvest in how we're making movies, the directors that we're bringing in, right? And how we're, finding new directors, new stories, like bring it back to the things that really matter to people, which is how are you going to make more movies that don't seem the same, because A24, that's like one of the things it has going for it is that it stands outside the big studio system, right? It's been super successful. Very recently, right, with like the drama with Zendaya and like Robert Pattinson, and then like Timothy Chalamet's, Marty Supreme last year. And so like if you can say that like this is the type of work we're trying to like continue forward, and we'll be showing you and being transparent about how we're going to continue doing that, in the future, I think a lot more people would have been receptive to, all of this. And then it also shows that you're thinking about the usage of AI in an intentional way and not just to cut people out and get rid of like industry jobs, which is the big thing that I think is what scares people.
Moving on to lessons for this entire, I would say, debacle. It really feels like this, we'd rather have a seat at the table, is tired. Like it's not compelling to audiences right now. And it is a defensive posture. It is
Yeah.
absence of like having an owned point of view on what,
Yeah.
you're doing and why and who it's for. This idea that you are ceding the strategic ground before a conversation starts is a really big and weak one for a brand that so far has come across as one with a lot of strength and integrity.
Yeah, I'll add to that because it reminds me of Reese Witherspoon recently had a similar controversy about the same thing about saying that,
Yes.
oh, we should be using AI, blah blah blah. And again, the problem here is that she just kind of said it very flippantly and didn't describe what she thought it might be useful for, right? And like, she's a businesswoman. She works, with Hello Sunshine, her production company. She does like the book club side of things. And so if she can't tell me as a business person what she's going to use AI for and what I should like, use it for myself, because she was saying more women need to be in AI, like why it will make that difference, then we go back to the same thing. You're naive, you're complicit, or like you don't know what you're talking about, right? So I really think that like the message for anybody in Hollywood at this point is like you need to come out and like say this is what we're going to be doing AI for and like the efficiency gains, right? Like we brought this up recently. Ben Affleck, right, has had clips go viral where he's talking about, where he thinks, AI can kind of come in. And he's been very staunch in saying, like, I don't think that it will ever replace a writer because it's just not a good writer, right? And so it's like, okay, he's actually thought about it, right? He's thought about it. And then, it turns out he sells his AI, like, company to Netflix. And it's like, oh, this is why you were thinking about it, right? But hello, Reese Witherspoon could also come at it from that angle, right? Where it shows that she's thought about it and she, wants it to make an actual difference in the industry. So I think like those are the things that we're expecting now from people. And I've talked about this recently in the context of something I'm calling competency porn, where it's like people want to know that what you're doing and are able to voice it in a clear way that gets people to understand. And I think that's one of the things that like we look at the speakers that we're pointing to now is like Mamdani is one of those, right, where it's like he can tell you and like break down what he's thinking and his thought process and why his values matter and why we're gonna do certain things. And I think that,
Hmm.
more people that want to be, doing these types of things need to create that messaging first before they go out and say, things that like people can then push back on because people will push back.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think, one of the lessons as well is, I mean, I think that A24 has done really good work on behalf of filmmakers and
Hmm.
on behalf of audiences for a long time. And and I think they've done a really good job of like encouraging an influencer machine that uplifts these filmmaker
Hmm.
stories. And so it's been really interesting. Like I think it was this, within the same week that we see Kane, the director of Backrooms, talking
Hmm.
about how, like, yeah, no, of course, like, why on earth should anyone use AI in creative process like that? Absolutely not. Like, no,
Yeah.
that is the antithesis. And we see this really creative person who made a great film through supported by A24 show up and be given that spotlight, and then
Right.
A24 itself kind of acting against that. And so I just think
Hmm.
that, like, again, kudos A24 to date for everything they've done to really uplift
Yeah.
others. I think that when you stop acting in alignment with the community, people notice. I
Yeah.
do think that we see there can be an opportunity for the community to like come together on behalf of a brand and for that to be to a brand's benefit, not just to their detriment. And so I would really love to see brands take more responsibility for like and act more in alignment with the communities they historically have supported, that they are uplifting, and like kind of take the risk that they will choose you. Like they
Hmm.
there is a path to the same amount of success by continuing to back your people rather than going
Hmm.
against your integrity.
Yes, love that. Um Now we can move on to the Odyssey and Universal and Christopher Nolan and influencers. Basically, what's happened is that Universal has decided not to hold word of mouth screenings for Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey, which means no influencers, no fan bloggers, no pre release social media flood. The world premiere is set to be in London on July 6th, and then the critics screenings will happen, and then it'll open fully to everybody on July 17th. How word of mouth screenings work is that studios will invite influencers 2 to 3 weeks before the release. They post glowing reactions. It manufactures a groundswell ahead of opening weekend. The key word here is manufacturers, right? I think one of the reasons why this is happening is because Universal has recently experienced the downside, which is that for Spielberg's Disclosure Day, there was a particularly viral influencer quote that said it's Spielberg's best film in 20 years. And then when people went to actually go see the movie and realized that it's actually not one of his best films, professional critics panned it and they would use it in their own reviews. And so it ended up becoming the story, and not in a good way. So I think Universal are betting on the fact that they aren't going to need influencers, A, but B, that they don't want to muddy the waters in any way, which is kind of what's starting to happen with this whole like influencer, campaign at movies, which is kind of crazy, right? Because most films these days have influencers, come out and support them in some way. So one of the things I, am wondering is whether this is going to change the future of all, movie premieres going forward, or if there's going to be like a bifurcation of like the, Oscar movies or like the movies that are meant to be really good are not going to use influencers. And then the ones that are meant to be more like fan favorites or, are kind of basically saying we're not a good movie. We need influencers to, market the movie for us. It's also, bringing up, this, I guess, long held feeling from film critics themselves who are basically thrilled, and very publicly that like influencers are being, kept out because they are kind of, I guess bringing down the art of like, film criticism, which is interesting to think about, right? Where it's like, is this part of the film industry that they want to continue to, prop up and like have be, as important as, it has been in the past, or should it be more so, going in the future? And I think that brings up a lot of things for us, like in society, right? Like, Letterboxd has become like a pretty big social platform of its own right. But then you have the opposite where it's like, when a film critic pans a movie, like, is it just like, do you still trust that like film critic, or are we moving to a system where like people only trust specific film critics, but not all of them? Did you hear about this, Leah?
Yes, and I do have thoughts, because it's a bit
Yeah.
interesting. The only ads I personally have seen for the Odyssey, like, and of course we've all been getting the steady drip of like, oh my gosh, and they're in it,
Hmm.
and they're in it, right? Like
Hmm.
we know that we know everyone who's involved, and we know they're incredibly talented, and so we expect great things. The
Right.
actual ads that I've seen are all the actors telling me to go watch it in IMAX. Literally every type of format. They're just trying to get people into theaters. And they're really showcasing like we invested in our tools. Like, isn't that amazing? You should care about the tools, and then we invested in that, and that should be what's bringing you in. And so, really, it feels very absent anything about the feeling and heart of the story. It seems very much like come here and be impressed at what we did. And this is a film that wants to be seen as a like serious movie for serious people, and I think from an industry standpoint, I think there's a little bit of sexism here where I think that a lot of influencers are, like the creator economy, people are used to the idea that there are a lot of women and young women who like when you picture an influencer, that's what
Hmm.
most people will
Hmm.
go to.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that there's also something sexist about like those are not like serious people. Like we're a movie for serious people, so we're going to do our screenings for serious people, and those are film critics, real ones.
Yeah.
Film critics are like at least like the classic sense, like more than 70% of them are men. And
Mhm.
I do think that we're just engaging in something here that's not being spoken around who do they want the respect of, and where do they think that will take them. So yeah, film critics are thrilled, and I bet they feel really flattered. And I think
Yeah.
that if you feel really flattered, you're going to get better reviews. And so I think this is kind of manipulative and not in a way that is cool. So that's just my take.
Interesting. I hadn't thought about that, but that does make a lot of sense. I guess one of the ways that like I had kind of been seeing it is like the fact that they are withholding these like extra, screenings and like influencers, keeping it a little bit more closed off and making it more exclusive, right? Is automatically just raising the bar. The fact that you are excluding people means that people all of a sudden pay attention a little bit, differently because it's like, oh, well, why isn't everybody being allowed, and
Hmm.
then I think that is a way to appeal to people too. But then I think it also is a way to kind of elevate that. There's this idea that, film critics will like elevate, your film, right?
Hmm.
And if they do give you a good review, that it is kind of like worth seeing a little bit more. The thing that is interesting for me is that usually, films that are like meant to be like Oscar bait. Obviously this is going to be Oscar bait, right? There's already like an
Hmm.
inherent like tone of like it's not going to be like popular enough, right? Like who's going to see it of like the masses, right? But this film already, because it is Christopher Nolan and it is, has all these like superstars in it, right? Like Matt Damon, Robert Pattinson, Tom
Yeah.
Holland,
Yes.
Zendaya, right? Like it's all these like very popular artists that are bringing their own audiences. So I would have assumed that this would be a film that most people would go see or would make the effort to go see. So it didn't need that extra like Oscar baity marketing to be around it. So it is interesting that they went in that, direction. But yeah, I also see it as a way of like, how do we get more attention? Let's do something different, right? They're already,
Hmm.
having the stars come out and, market it in a way that usually doesn't get done for movies, right? The fact that they're pairing it to like IMAX screenings more than other films that are out there show that they're thinking about the marketing different. And this is another way. So yeah, maybe it's just being very attention grabby for the sake of being,
Yeah.
attention grabby.
Yeah, it's really interesting, especially since, Christopher Nolan's last release was Oppenheimer, right? And so,
Yeah.
like, that, from my experience, Barbenheimer is what
Right.
drew my awareness of it. It really benefited from this bigger cultural wave than itself. And it, again, attaching itself to like a very different property and not intentionally. Like, I think, influencers took it and ran with it and made it fun and catchy. And I think, this is obviously very different. Like, this feels starkly the opposite direction from a sentiment standpoint, regardless of whether they did influencer screenings for that or not. It's like the way in which they're approaching this marketing is, as you said, very much focused on exclusivity. This stands alone. And I'd be very curious to see how that plays out versus,
Yeah.
again, a very different and I think influencer and like femme influencer
Yeah.
enabled rise to attention from more people than might have otherwise seen it in the case of Oppenheimer.
Yeah, 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 definitely. So a couple lessons for me is that scarcity is a marketing strategy. Yeah. Making it more exclusive, you're trying to get them to come out and see the film. I think the fact that Universal recently had that, huge miss with Steven Spielberg's last film made them a little bit more cautious. So that's something that influencers are going to have to fix on their own because it's like you don't want the entire industry to be headed in that direction. If that's the reputation that you're kind of building up, that like you're basically gonna, give out a free review because you get invited to a movie premiere, then like you're just gonna lose your, entry into, being an influencer in this way. As soon as you start losing trust from like audience members for the job that you're supposed to be doing, which is reviewing a movie in honest and truthful way, then like, maybe it is time for you to lose that privilege because it is a privilege to be able to go to like movie theaters and like, see this. So, and then on the flip side, for those influencers, why would you lie to your audience about how you feel about a movie? Because then you get them to go see it. And if they don't agree with you, then like they'll start trusting you less overall. So like really, who does it help to lie about this, right?
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, across these three stories, this theme of losing trust with audiences
Hmm.
is rampant, and in some cases, we see people going against the or acting in a way that's not in alignment with their community, and that not working out. And I think this is a really
Yeah.
interesting. It is a statement by like Nolan, the Odyssey's team, all of them about who they believe their community is and the trust that they want to build with that community. And they are not aligning themselves with the influencers. They are saying that their community is the film
Right.
critic, is the serious person.
Hmm.
And there is bias that goes into that. They are picking some people, like the people who they are expecting to act and review favorably on their behalf and that they're aligning with is very specific just by being, again, majority men, majority institutional. And so I'll be very curious to see. I mean, I would expect influencers to like any number of influencers to rally around it and kind of like
Hmm.
pi- piggyback on as quickly as possible. So I don't think
Yeah.
they will be alienated. And I do think the bigger message for them, as you said, is you know, pay attention to which brands are going to decide like they need
Yeah.
your vote, and be intentional about building your own persona and audience
Hmm.
that is going to bring that brand to work with you. And then, yeah, you might shoot yourself in the foot if you keep acting against your audience's best interest, or the some brands are not going to be a good fit for you. All right. This is a fun topic. I do not play golf, but I love a
Hmm.
small, fun vehicle. Golf carts are kind of what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so so Julian Honig spent 10 years at Apple under Johnny Ive, creating the Apple Watch, working on Vision Pro, working on a whole bunch of secret things, such as
Yeah.
alleged Apple car projects. It had worked with Audi and Lamborghini and Jose Antonio Uva and a couple of other really interesting people, co-founder of Cowboy Bikes, founder of an industrial design studio, to make this very premium, luxe, attractive golf cart because Uva pointed out that he couldn't find a single nice golf cart for his resort. And they started to design a solution for fun. And so 4 years later, they are releasing the Amble One for $25,000. It can go up to 40 miles per hour. It's street legal in Europe and Asia. I think it's just such a fun example of people making something they just want to have in the world and doing it with the people in their community, and it's been getting a lot of coverage this past week. So I think the conversation for us to have, it has a lot to do with partnership and picking people who want to have fun with what they're working on. Really believe that the fit and finish and quality and beauty of something they're making is in itself like some makes something worth doing. And there's also something really interesting around the investors that they've brought on, including, I believe, one of the co-founders of Solar City, where people are clearly looking at an end game that is not just really beautiful golf carts for hotels and resorts. Like they also are, yes, starting with the primary market, but thinking about what they could make longer term. At the same time that we see Johnny Ive and Love from designing for Ferrari, so it's going to be a fun thing to
Yeah.
talk about.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah. So this is one of my recent favorite stories because of what you were saying, where it's like you have founders that had a problem that they wanted to fix for themselves and created it, right? Like those are my favorite like founding, stories and insights because it's like you're building a product for yourself and then expanding the market, from there. And so, when you're faced with this type of problem of like, oh, I want a fancy, golf cart at a fancy like resort, you realize like, oh, if I'm thinking this, there certainly must be other people thinking about it, especially, in high end, luxury. And the reason why it stuck out to me is because it was like, oh, another Apple designer. And so my first thought was like the Johnny Ive Ferrari that was recently announced that was pretty widely panned because it didn't really fit the molds, of what a Ferrari is thought to be. And I think maybe part of the thing is like that was like meant to be an actual Ferrari, whereas this is like a collaboration between designers who used to work at Apple and Audi. And it seemed to elevate both at the same time, right? Um, So I think that's, yeah, like we were saying earlier, is like this overarching lesson of like what a partnership means, and like, making sure that it's weighted for both of you to like benefit from it, and not just like, use it as a way to, obscure, bad news, or like being taken advantage of, or like, realizing that like you don't actually know what you're talking about. And I think that those are the things that people should be considering when they're, thinking about, having partnerships, is like, how does it benefit you? Does it benefit them? Does it benefit your audience? Right. I think a lot of the times brands fail to think about their audience. Like they just see, oh, we can get access to that person's audience and bring them in and sell, to them, instead of thinking about, does this fit with our current audience? And like, is there a benefit for them as well? Thinking back on like earlier Kylie and like Meta, it kind of makes sense for the Kylie, audience that does, care about like fashion. Most of them know about her brand, about being an influencer creator. So like they're not really hiding things from like her audience. Her audience pretty much is bought into like her, brand, and what she's known for. So when, this came out and I see it being a like $25,000 like golf cart, I immediately saw the target market for this, right? There's a lot of boomers that live on golf resorts. Golf is already a high end and like luxury brand or sport. So it automatically made sense. I didn't even see it as like, oh, hotel resorts would want to have that. But yeah, now that I think back on it, when you go to like a luxury hotel and they want to drive you around, not even like golf courses, just like around the hotel, they'll take you in like a golf cart. So already the fact that they have all these like initial, audiences makes sense. And that's the type of product you want to make, right? Where it's like, you already know who you're going to sell to. Have your ICP, you have the positioning, and you have pretty much everything. And then sure enough, I just looked it up. They're sold out for the year, right? Which shows that it's like they already found like their, audience. The big question now is like, where do they expand from there, right? Like, or do they build a lower market like golf cart to start replacing some of, those types of models? Do they, continue going to like, more and more like luxury like hotels? I'll definitely be keeping, track of this brand just because it is interesting.
Yeah, and I thought it looked really cool. I mean, it's
Yeah.
fun to just see people make something that they want to see in the world. Things that it brought up for me is
Hmm.
who has access to capital, like who
Yeah.
has the resources, and then what do you get to make with those resources,
Hmm.
and what is their alignment? It really sounds like a hey, like I could get going on funding this. This would be a fun project for us to
Yeah.
work on together, and we can make something we'd really like, and we have time. We can take 4 years to get it right. And, like,
Yeah.
no matter what, like, we'll have the stories of doing this. Like, I think that's just a special place for a project to start, but it does
Hmm.
require that, there be enough resources to get going. And so, I am really thrilled to see this made, but it also makes me feel sort of sad that, so many different aspects of this luxury creation story had to exist for us to maybe get like a really beautiful object that does wind up being much more than just a resort golf cart, but
Hmm.
becomes a team of people who know how to build a small street legal vehicle with a certain level of craft and care and attention to detail for a variety of use cases. It reminds me a lot of when we would see Nest coverage back in the day. It's like, here's a team of people who really care about craft. They make each other better. They love challenging each other. They have access to resources,
Hmm.
and there is an exciting, interesting bonus of engaging with climate and like where we're going with that. And so I see a similar combination of things happening here, and I'd love to see where they take it.
Yeah, definitely. Lesson for me is that your story is a great way to get PR. Like, how do you kind of form that story from the get go in order to be able to like, pitch it, right? Because one could say is like, oh, this is just for like, rich people, or this is just for like luxury. Like the market is so small. Why should it get the attention of the everyday man, right? Why should it go viral? Why should I be learning about, a golf cart when I don't play golf? I am not going to like resorts, luxury resorts, but then the flip side is like, well, because it's an interesting story because it combines all these elements of, design, of bringing, Apple, which we know designs, good products, Audi, which we know designs good cars, and it puts it in a way that makes it interesting to the layman, right? And then from there, you expand outwards. Well, we got the solar, city person to like invest as well. And like they already come with like their audience. And, it turns out it is like a, solar vehicle, right? Like it's electric. So it's like all these things that like I guess were, part of the design process of like these are the choices we're making for the type of vehicle that we're building that will attract the attention because of the way that they thought about it. And then throw in the fact that, they created it for fun. It's just like, how cool is that, that they were able to, come together, work as a team and have fun doing it, Is that not the ideal way for like, founders to build a product and then sell it? So just add all these like nuggets that like, the more that I read about it, the more interesting that it was. And that's just like seeing it from like, my marketing eye of like, ah, that I recognize that. I recognize that. So that was kind of like, pretty
Mhm.
cool to see. And so that's kind of, my lesson here is like, I believe that each company has that, stemming from like that original like founder insight of why you think your product deserves to exist, and then building on top of it of like why your consumer should care, like what's different from all the other ones that are out there, and then building the story around that and going to like journalists to pitch them on like a fun story.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, being able to come in with like your like this credibility and experience that yes will like help with being picked up by press, but then also do something that feels fully your own. I feel
Yeah.
like is such an inspiring story that we all like want and need to hear more
Mhm.
about right now as opposed to yeah so, like companies that are building things just from the standpoint of like bottom line what will this do for us as opposed
Right.
to like are we having fun building with people we like and maybe in the
Mhm.
process doing something incredibly cool that requires hard work. I think it yes is a story well positioned for the moment we're in, and I felt differently about it as a reader than I did reading about the Love From collab with Mark Newsom where they designed like a sailing lantern that I think was like $4,000. Like, even though that
Mhm.
also is a luxury good for a very specific
Yeah.
user that's not me, that bummed me out. But this
Yeah.
one feels really joyful and just
Yeah.
unpacking like you can build luxury goods and not have people resent them. I think is
Yeah.
another interesting thing to look at. And I do think coming back to like pursuing creativity and play and talking about how important that is can be inspiring to people even if they're never buying your product.
Yeah, yeah. Another thing that just reminded me of, right now we are, in the sea of so many products being the same, literally, but just different brands.
Mhm.
So this is
Yes.
a way to like figure out how you are different, because the only way that you're going to stand out these days is to have a different story and a different message, that captures people's attention, instead of trying to be like every other, SaaS company or every other B2B, company that, is kind of boring.
Mhm. And I remember I had worked with an electric car company, that was in 2016 called NIO. They're Chinese, and they
Mm.
aspirationally wanted to be, like, designing the first self-driving cars. And I remember, how the team a brilliant, like, great ex-IDEO folks coming together sort of went from this dream of, "We're going to get to, like, what if we could remove the steering wheel, and what if" like, and really designing and thinking of these worlds but not being able to execute because the technology wasn't there and there like were really strict requirements around NHTSA and all of the highway transit safety. And so I think it's really fun to like when I think of Ferrari working with Ferrari versus working on this, like I'm so happy for them that they found a space that they could play and make something new and strip away and not get trapped into some of the heritage and genuine requirements that come with working on something that might automatically get more attention like the word Ferrari but yield less space to make something new. Yeah, really exciting and just fun to see from a creative standpoint.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so takeaways for the whole episode is basically what does it mean to be a partner? And what are you bringing to the partnership, and what does it cost? For the Meta and Kylie partnership, it was a cosmetic partnership, right? one that has a product problem for Meta and that is using a celebrity to cover it up. The hardware isn't changing. It's just that now you have a woman peddling it for you. So this is a partnership that kind of protects the product instead of fixing it. For A24 and Google DeepMind, it's more of a defensive partnership, right? Where A24 is using it as a seat at the table, but it's coming across more as a posture than as a real strategy for them of how they want their company to be efficient and continue making movies. With Universal and their lack of influencers, this is an opt out type of situation where it's not just riding on the coattails of like Christopher Nolan and all the stars, but as a fight against the influencers that maybe aren't being as trusted as they once were. And so, using it as a way to be scarce in a moment when people might want more. And then the Amble partnership is more generative, where it's like there's people coming together to fix a problem that they had and having fun with it along the way. So the question here isn't whether to to partner with anybody. It's what you're going to be bringing to the table and figuring out whether it's worth it for you to be to be in the partnership, both for them, but then also for your audience.
Yes, all of those, a million times yes. And for me, I think the thread across these stories is very much around trust and credibility. And so I think, going back and looking at Meta glasses, this Kylie launch does not take away from the fact that people are rightly concerned about privacy, surveillance, like data mining practices. And Kylie may be a really good distraction from that and enable the sale of glasses. But I think that for any creator who's considering partnering with a brand where there are stories that have broken trust with your customer base, assume that that will catch up with you and affect the trust that they have in what you are bringing to your relationship with them. And then I think looking at the same thing with A24 and Google, I think this was a really big trust breaking moment between A24 and their audiences and the artists that they were thought to be the champion of. And in that moment of breaking trust and not really controlling the narrative, they come across as not having a strategic plan that centers the very communities they've uplifted so far. And I do think that's going to hurt them long term. And I do think that, looking at the Odyssey and not wanting to have influencers involved in the initial process, it is saying a lot about whose opinions they want to elevate and who
Mhm.
they're aligning themselves with, and where, credibility comes from. Going with more institutional channels is a choice. I do think it's a choice that will hopefully work out well for them, but should put creators in a position of thinking about who trusts them and why, and how you're willing to show up. And I do think also just building things with friends that you trust is fun. It's such a privilege. And not everything that you build is going to be lasting. But being able
Mhm.
to build something in a way that is creative and fun and not causing harm is something that I think we don't hear about a lot these days. And I really hope that we see more of these examples, because I do think the connection with customers and trust that you get to build when you are just acting in alignment with what you really believe should exist in the world is really great brand equity.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much, Leah. Where can people find you?
You can find me at my design studio, our mutual friend. We're based in San Francisco and we work with founders and teams on everything from product, brand, and strategy. And it's a hugely fun thing where I do get to work with a team of friends that are top of their game and I trust. So it's a really, really fun part of my life. You can also find me at in the physical world in San Francisco at Oasis. I'm on the board of Oasis Arts, a queer arts nonprofit, and we host really, really amazing shows. You should check us out. And you can also find me on Instagram or Twitter, Lia Naps. It's all one word on Twitter, and there's a dot in it on Instagram. I love naps, and it's shorter to spell than my last name. So yeah,
Yeah.
I hope to catch up with more of you folks.
And then you can follow me at Sonia Pichaz everywhere and the podcast at Mean Tea Pod on YouTube, Spotify, and TikTok. See you next week.
Thanks for having me.